Aloha, everyone. This week we are going to be talking about women and religion. Yeah, so I really want us to think about women and religion, especially in terms of how religion can be both oppressive and progressive. So we're going to go ahead and start with the Endrick tradition of sati, which is ritual burning. So it's against the law now, but um, it does it is connected to Sati, the wife of Shiva. So when she was unable to bear her father's humiliation of her and her husband, she became like a fire. And it also means a chaste woman, a good woman. The idea is almost like it's a varat. Um, something you commit to with your husband for an entire life to take care of your husband. So when he dies, the woman dies with him. So that's how it happened in the past. When a man died, the woman just jumped in the fire with him, died with him. Again, against the law now. Even whether it's voluntary or by force. So the last incident happened in 1989, and it's debated whether the woman chose to do the ritual burning herself or if she was punished by the family. um so I mean, and we see in the Hindu religions that women do carry this very powerful roles. They're they are the gods, and some of the most powerful gods. But once the patriarchy begins to move into the picture, you can see how this changes in all the traditions. So it's you have to look at this in its context and think about, in a funny way, it is beautiful that a woman would want to follow her husband literally to death. I mean, I I talk with my husband a lot about that. Like, wouldn't it be cool if we died together, kind of thing? So one doesn't have to be alone without the other. But it's not expected of the man, right? If the woman dies, the man doesn't jump in the fire. So, yeah, I mean, you have to think through these things in their times. Also, fire is a form of sacrifice in the Indic tradition, the Abrahamic tradition, the indigenous tradition. So yeah, they have meaning, right? We can look at them as oppressive, and they are, and it's really important to recognize that and raise awareness to the way women are treated, especially in the texts that sometimes are still taken literally. But we also have to try to find meaning and understanding for the tradition that happens in these practices. So in early Jewish prayer, blessed are you, O God, King of the universe, which is how most the Jewish prayer starts, the Jewish chants start. I thank you, O God, who has not made me a goy or Gentile, a slave, and a woman. So the prayer literally says, thank you, God, for not making me a woman. Um, but in the Tanakh, we have some really powerful women prophets. We have Deborah, who is a prophet, a wife, and a judge. Jael, who kills the formidable Sisera, and Rahab, who was the spy who helped the Israelites claim Jericho. But she is also in Jesus's genealogy in the book of Matthew. Um, it's believed in tradition that she gave birth to Boaz, who married Ruth, and from that marriage came Obed, the father of Jesse and the father of David, who is then Jesus is the Messiah in the line of David. So it is through Rahab that this most anointed people come, or I should say men come. Um, and also just that was an interracial marriage to some extent. We sort of saw that in the Moses story, with Moses's wife Zipporah, but Ruth was a Moabite woman, and Boaz was an Israelite. So part of the story is about this interracial marriage, which brings us this is an Israelite king and the Messiah that establishes Christianity. Also Huldah. So according to rabbinic literature, Huldah was considered a teacher of women and men, and may have even had her own school. So the literature also suggests that she was a relative of Jeremiah, of the prophet, the great prophet, both descendants of Joshua through Rahab. So yeah, we have great women prophets in the Tanakh. Now, these women are before the patriarchy. They're before the religion becomes centralized, and it's more of a tribal religion. This is in Judges, most of these prophets. And actually the whole mantra of the book of Judges is that Israel has no king. So maybe it's sort of a slam to the women, like, it's being run by women, but I don't see it that way. I see these women as being very powerful. But then we have some really bad things. People always want to go back to the good old days. Well, Abraham trades Sarah to the king to basically to have prosperity. Isaac does the same thing. Men from Sodom want to rape Lot's guest. Lot offers his daughters to be raped instead. And then Lot's daughters rape their dad in return. Great. Yeah. So it's funny when oftentimes when Christians oppose homosexuality, it'll talk about the sin of Sodom and say that it's that these men wanted to rape other men, but perhaps it's the sin of Sodom is, to me, is that Lot actually offers his daughter to be raped instead of a man being raped. And again, I wouldn't be a good teacher if I wasn't pointing these things out and making us think about them, especially for people that do really take a literal perspective of the Bible. There's a similar story in Judges 19 where once again a man has a guest, and the men from the city say, we're gonna rape that male guest of yours. He says, oh no, don't do that. Here, I'll give you my virgin daughter and my concubine, just don't rape the man. So he does. The concubine gets killed. Then they cut her up into 12 pieces, send her body parts to each tribe of Israel, and that's sort of like their invitation to a meeting. So yeah, I mean, objectivity, it doesn't really get better than that for objectivity of women literally being cut up into pieces. Oh boy. But we do also have to keep in mind that Israel is the bride, right? So we went over that in the tradition, that Israel is the bride of Yahweh. And then in Christianity, it's the same thing. Christians are the bride of Christ. The church is the bride of Christ. So we also have to keep in mind that sometimes women are representing that type of thing. It's more metaphorical, the bride of God. Oh yeah, and Israelites have slaves, so we want to keep that in mind. Sarah abandons Hagar and Ishmael. Abraham almost sacrifices his son as a form of worship. Jacob takes his brother's blessings with because of his mother who encouraged it. So, yeah, we just have to keep these things in perspective. So segregation in Israel, women are fight right alongside the men in the battlefield, but they're not allowed to pray with the men at the wall. They are separated. There's one side where the men pray and another side where the women pray. Israelites are required to do military service. I think it's 2 years. So they're all trained fighters. So we'll look at a quick clip here. So this is going to talk about Rosh Hodesh Elul, which is the 12th and final month of the Jewish calendar. And it's believed to connect the past year with the coming year. It's a time some see it as a time to reflect where we can stand on where we are and where we want to be. It's also when Moses ascended to Mount Sinai for the third time, and when he returned 40 days later, that day marking Yom Kippur. So again, this Moses story is so connected to so many rituals and traditions in Israelite religion. So what do they do on Rosh Hodesh Elul? They blow the shofar. They give extra charity. They chant special songs, and it's a holiday that's in anticipation of these high holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. דרך מישהו אחר, לא אחרת שלך. נכון, לא נכנס. קח את הנביא לך שאתה עושה את זה כאן. תביש אותה, בדיוק זה שאתה עושה. תביש אותה, תביש אותה. בכיף, בשמחה. יכולים לקחת את זה.
This was a perfect Rosh Chodesh Elul for me. It was perfect because we were able to bring the Torah in. Women sat here all night, holding the Torah scroll, so we could have it this morning. לפני שדנה תעלה לתורה, אני רוצה להקריא תפילה שנכתבה בכנסת הרבנים של התנועה המסורתית לזכרה של שירה בנקי, וניקח דקה לזכור גם אותה. אל מלא רחמים שוכן במרומים, אמצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים. את נשמת שירה בת מיקי ואורי, זכרה לברכה ולשלום, ונתת שלום בארץ בשמחת עולם לכל יושביה, ונאמר אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, הגומר החייבים טובות, שגמלני כל טוב. אמן. מי שגמלה כל טוב, הוא יגמלכם כל טוב סלע. 2 weeks ago, a 16-year-old was murdered here in the streets of Jerusalem because she marched in gay pride. I think it affected the size of our group. I think many people didn't come because they're afraid of violence. There were many people here, ultra-Orthodox, who let themselves threaten us and say that we will die for what we're doing. I want to ask you not to be afraid. We're here to stay, and there will be a day that there'll be a bat mitzvah here with a Torah scroll, with a shofar, with phylacteries, with a talis, with singing out loud, because women are people. And not only that, we were able to bring shofar today. Not one, not two, but 20. And every woman here tried to blow shofar. 9 of us actually did.
So, yeah, that's has some really important points in it. First of all, you have ultra orthodox women threatening these more progressive women, if we want to call them that. You have the association with LGBTQ, right? Because really homosexuality is an issue of gender and order at the heart of it. So you have those two things together, and then also, of course, bringing in the Torah scroll, giving women that religious authority. And so, we have to ask things like, would Paul support women of the wall? So who is Paul again? He is the main author of the New Testament. He never met Jesus, but saw him in a vision and became, one of the main church builders. So, again, we have to look at Paul as both, progressive and oppressive. There were women in the early Christian church. It wasn't yet called the Christian church. The very followers of Jesus, Mary, the fact that they were associating with a rabbi. The women saw Jesus first when he resurrected from the tomb. These things are giving women a power that they don't usually have. Phoebe, who was getting more letters of recommendation than Paul, and there's a mention of Aphia, a letter addressed specifically to a Priscilla. Chloe reports to Paul. So these are all women who are mentioned in letters and are seemingly organizing or leading somehow in that movement. It seems that women are allowed to serve as deacons. So Phoebe says, I commend to you our sister Phoebe, a deacon of the church. But, then we have really problematic things like this. Women should be silent and subordinate. So, as in all the churches of the saints, women should be silent in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but should be subordinate, as the law also says. If there is anything they desire to know, let them ask their husbands at home, for it is shameful for a woman to speak in church. Or did the word of God originate with you? Or are you the ones it has reached? So yeah, on the one hand, yes, Paul is silencing women in the church. On the other hand, women are not typically allowed to even be in a congregation with men, as is shown by the video that we just watched. The women are separated from the men in the prayer at the Western Wall. Paul is allowing women to congregate with the men, but they are submissive under their husbands. So I would say that Paul is progressive in his time. And so is Jesus, as for some of the things I just mentioned, but also many others. But he's still telling them not to speak. So again, if we take this literally for the rest of time, then women can never have authority in a spiritual way. It's just simply saying that women cannot have a connection with the divine. For me, I mean, I think at the end of the day, and this is my opinion, it's the thing that bothers me most about the conservative views of abortion, which suggests that women are not moral enough, intelligent enough, or just responsible enough to make their own decisions about not just their body, but moral decisions, religious, spiritual decisions. And I get that because that is something that is really underscores a lot of the older religious texts in all the religions. It's just that women aren't capable of having that spiritual responsibility and authority. Um, so, um, so yeah, people interpret this different ways, though. Like women were told to be silent because they didn't know how to participate in a conversation. So it's kind of like if we were in class and a woman suddenly walked in who had never been in a group with other men and just never been in a discussion, and then suddenly they're just talking in the middle of the, you know, the sermon or whatever, you know, they have to be silent. The man has to teach them. I'm not sure that's really what was happening here. Jewish law would suggest not. Um, but you know, it's something to think about. It's definitely something to think about. Again, I permit no woman to teach. Let a woman learn in silence with full submission. I permit no woman to teach or to have authority over a man. She is to be kept silent. So subjection, quietness, those are the Greek words. So it's this idea that women can learn, but men have to be in the authority. And that's very much the position of many churches still today. I mean, whether that be Catholics or Christians or Jews, can women be rabbis? Can women be pastors? Would Paul support female ordination? So this is one of the questions I will have you guys try to answer today. You know, because if he was progressive in his time and he came back today, would he perhaps say, yeah, I think this is relevant. Again, we have wives submit to your husbands. Some of these books are also, if you can remember, in the disputed books that are not written actually by Paul, or may not be written by Paul, still carried through the community of Christians. But that also throws doubt on some of these, some of the harsher laws. So again, it's really goes back to me about how it's rooted in beliefs about women in general. For Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor. Yet she will be saved through childbearing, provided they continue in the faith and love and holiness with modesty. So again, it's this idea that women are evil, right? Eve with the apple. But if we have children, we're somehow saved. So not all Jewish men took this position, but we see this. I think we see this strongly in a lot of the traditions. The view that, you know, women's purpose is really childbearing, and you know, I've heard that in all kinds of things, like even in the hip hop community, the men will also often try to be supportive of the women by saying, we got to respect the women because they have the babies. And I'm like, ooh, no, you got to respect the women because we're out here dancing with you and we're part of the culture. Not just because we have your babies, you know. Yeah, that's important, but it's not everything. So women in the Quran, it's a similar thing, oppressive or progressive. So this is a verse in the Quran, verse 434. I'm sure you can find different translations of it. but it says men are the maintainers of women because Allah has made some of them to excel others and because they spent out of their property. The good women are therefore obedient, guarding the unseen as Allah has guarded, and as to those on part who you fear desertion, admonish them and leave them alone in the sleeping places and beat them. Then if they obey you, do not seek a way against them. Surely Allah is great. So women who you fear are going to desert you, or women who admonish you, leave them alone and beat them. Ooh, that's even worse than just keeping them silent. So this is pretty harsh. It does give a view that's, even to the point where if you fear they're going to desert you, wow, if you fear they're going to desert you, for me, it's like, what are you doing wrong? It doesn't challenge the man to step up, but that's the point, right? Because men are the maintainers of women. Um, you know, so, but Muhammad, like Paul, was progressive in his time. He prohibited infanticide. So when female infants were buried alive, he questioned for what crime was she killed. Jesus did the same thing. There's a story about a woman who committed adultery, and they're stoning this woman, and Jesus says, "Where's the man?" Basically, this isn't just a one player game. And then he says, you know, he who has no sin should cast the first stone, and they all leave, and the woman is spared. But that is a story that many scholars believe was added later. And there's movements of women also in Christianity, in the Gnostic Gospels and things like that. But also for Muhammad, he abolished women's status as property. So this is definitely stepping up. He established women's legal capacity. He granted them the right to receive their own dowry. Marriage becomes contractual. He allowed women to maintain control over their property and allowed women to maintain their maiden name. So these are big things, right? This is really progressive. So it's so similar though. It's like, how is the religion perceived? If it's literal, if it's just looking at the book and saying this is what God spoke about women, that they should be silent, or that they should be obedient, or that they should be secondary, and that's that, well, then we're always living in a 1500 to 2000-year-old world or further, right? Going back into the Israelite tradition where they're cutting up bodies, sending them out. Or you can look at deeply into the text. You think about the text. What is the meaning? What is the point of it? Is that what is meant to pervade and persevere into modern times about these texts, is to maintain these laws that were established for women in that time. So this is just something in religion that we can look at. We can use women to look at this and also really think about the meaning of religion. So the ideal relationship in Islam is, again, abrogation. So that idea that the last revelation in the text is the most authoritative, and this is the last revelation about relationships between men and women. The believing men and believing women are allies of one another. They enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong, and establish prayer and give zakat and obey Allah and his messengers. Those Allah will have mercy upon them. Indeed, Allah is exalted, mighty and wise. Allah has promised the believing men and the believing women gardens beneath which rivers flow, wherein they abide eternally, and pleasant dwellings in the gardens of perpetual residence, but approval from Allah is greater. It is that which is the greatest attainment. So yeah, this is similar to Paul, who says, there is neither Jew nor Gentile, nor neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. But of course, these are looking into the divine ideal, right? Or even possibly the afterlife, where there's no longer these, hierarchies. But isn't that what you should be trying to attain on earth and with the divine anyway? So yeah, deep stuff here. And this would be a great paper. If you guys want to use this, you would have a lot of sources from what I've given you. So treatment of women in Islam, so it's very different. So in Egypt, women can actually work in parliament, but they can't be judges. They receive the best education. They need male relatives, permissions to travel. In Morocco, women can be judges. So in Saudi Arabia, much of the real estate owned in certain areas is owned by women. They can own businesses. They can't drive a car. They're restricted to appropriate positions and sexual segregation. In Kuwait, they cannot vote, and they move to segregate universities. In Iran, women must wear hijab in public, but they have a woman vice president, or had. In Pakistan, women can vote, and they can act as prime minister. In Afghanistan, they're forced to wear a hijab, forced women to give up jobs, and prevent women from going to school. So, it's diverse from country to country, which is really just support for these different ways you can interpret the text and find meaning in the religion, to different effects and affects, So this is really, really important stuff. So again, the hijab in Egypt. So the hijab is viewed as a form of resistance to Western culture. Is the hijab oppressive to women? It's a show of status. The style of veil depends on your interpretation of the Quran. Some view it as a sign of respect and religious devotion. So it has, religious ritual clout, a meaning, right? But you're still covering a woman completely up, and so, I see, yeah, it's a form of resistance to Western culture. So perceptions of the other, right? In the Western culture, everything covered but her eyes. What a cruel male-dominated culture. Nothing covered but her eyes. What a cruel male-dominated culture. So it's how you see it. But at the root of it all, to me, a male doesn't have to be covered. I don't know, as a surfer, yeah, I wear skimpy bikinis too most of my life, but it's something really freeing about not having to wear clothing, especially somewhere that it's hot. And just, I don't know. But the men are much more modest in those countries as well. So anyways, this is something to think about. It's something you could write about. Then you have problems with security, right? forms of hijab. Even how to do a hijab. So um, modern versions. And then they even have surfing styles of hijab. Um, when I was in Israel, I went surfing, and there were a bunch of ultra orthodox Jewish women who were swimming in their and something like this, a Jewish style covering that they went swimming in. And I was thinking, like, how bad it must have looked for me. I was out there in my little wetsuit, and they were in there, and a lifeguard was yelling at me. I don't think I was supposed to be there. I think it was some kind of black ball, but I didn't know. I didn't know what he was saying in Hebrew, so I just kept surfing. Oh gosh. Okay. So just moving forward, traditional gender roles. Some churches say men and women are equal, but they have different roles. Uh, but traditional roles can be oppressive, right? Women should be in the kitchen. They should raise the children. Women should not surf. That's me surfing with a bunch of guys. Um, and when I first started surfing, when I first started breakdancing or hip hop dance, uh, that was the whole thing. Women should not be doing that. It's aggressive, dangerous sport, and I certainly shouldn't be doing it with a bunch of guys in my little bikini, or shouldn't be dancing with a bunch of guys. So it's just really, I mean, I think it's hard for women nowadays to understand these roles, because we have made so many strides, that women can kind of be whatever they want to be. And, it's beautiful. But these role plays can also be oppressive to men, right? Like, how could the man ever live up to the ideal of treating his wife like God would treat you, and having to always feel like he's the man of the house who has to, bring home the bacon, and you know, the woman makes the bacon, the man brings home the bacon. Um, and having to, just carry that load of the financial and all these things. Uh, for women, it's like women who have it all, and trust me, it's a lot, right? You're supposed to work and have a career, and then come home and take care of the house and all that stuff, because the man doesn't think they're supposed to do that. So yeah, it's a killer, man, straight up. And then, or we could just say whatever works, if the man wants, maybe sometimes the man stays home and sometimes the woman goes to work, or maybe they switch it up, you know. So marriage isn't the same throughout time either. In first century Israel, women were as young as 12. They hadn't even reached puberty yet. There were arranged marriages. Women were exchanged for property. So, when people start talking about redefining marriage, acting like they're following the scripture, yeah, I don't know if that works. Divorce in the Tanakh, sometimes it is approved, even commanded. Other times it's not. So we have differing views. Other traditional marriage. So 17th century America, women were auctioned off for 80 pounds of tobacco. Yeah. Want to go back to that traditional marriage, anybody? Polygyny was illegal until 1962, was legal until 1962. So having many wives. Um, so interracial marriages were legal until 1960, were illegal until 1967, and LGBTQ marriages were illegal until 2016. So does Paul endorse the American family? Ironically, the Brady Bunch was progressive in its day because these were like two divorced marriages getting together. And you know, as it turned out, the actor was gay, and I believe a couple of the female daughters were also lesbian. So make sure you guys use the video lecture and also one of the clips. So there's 3 clips. There's the Women of the Wall clip, and there's 2 other clips that I want you to watch, which are sort of like discussions of women in religion, rabbis, and feminists, atheists, all different traditions, Islam, who discuss these issues and just write a post. So the one thing that I saw in some of the blogs, which was not quite up to par, is you guys kind of more just talking about your sort of feelings or things that you've heard about specific traditions. But what I want you to really do is to look at the story or look at the clip, use the lectures, or if you have other research material you want to use, you can, but you've got to cite it. You can't just say, this is something I've been hearing about, because the idea of coming to school and learning it is to challenge that. You know, if you heard a story of Pele growing up, which I did, I lived on the Big Island, um, that's a very valid source, but you got to let us know, this is the story that I heard. You might say from who, you might not, but this is something I grew up with. So that's definitely a credible source, a story that is still being spread, right? But you have to let us know, not just something like, oh, everybody knows that, blah, blah, blah. No, no. Where did you get the source? So really try to be more specific and detailed in the next 2 posts. And again, yes, these, you know, so next time we're doing religion and popular culture. So go ahead and just, if you find something interesting or something that you've already written about, these are the things that you can start thinking about to break down into a research paper. Like I say, you have several sources here now, enough to probably do a paper, especially if you got 1 or 2 more strong sources. So yeah, have fun with this, and I'll see you next week. Aloha.